Welcome, friends, to Radicalized Truth Survives, where you know that we got your back week after week. We are on episode 39, and it is a banging episode. I'm here with my friends, disinformation researchers, Jim Stewartson and High Fidelity, and we are going to be talking about preventing an algorithm apocalypse with our very special guest, Alex Winter, director of the amazing new documentary, The YouTube Effect. And you won't want to miss that.
Crap.
Yeah. Wow.
That is, you know, there are very few documentaries that just fucking get it right. Very few, right? They, like, most have something that's just terribly, you know, there's some message in there that's amiss. This thing hits it on every level, and I loved it. And you know, Alex is amazing.
Our friends know him as an actor, but he actually is an incredibly brilliant director, writer. So that's very exciting that he offered us a really long form interview about his upcoming very, very important film. And we are very grateful to you, Alex. Okay, so why don't we jump into a coughing episode of Front Loaded?
I was sneezing. Front Loaded.
Now, sneezing everywhere. The boys got allergies today, I guess. Gesundheit, by the way. Where are my manners?
It's raining and moldy here.
Oh,
it's raining mold? God, that sounds apocalyptic.
It's Ohio.
All right. You guys missed my Shiza Minnelli comment, so I'll say it again.
Oh, I like Shiza Minnelli.
Shiza Minnelli is just epic. So it would kind of surprise me if our viewers hadn't really thought about this, but it's very important to remind yourself daily, if not hourly, that all of Trump's friends are foreign fucking agents. And they all have foreign entanglements, and many of them are being raided, indicted, fraudulently pardoned. But there is a whole rogues gallery of felons, war criminals, and felonious billionaires who enabled this presidency. And the reason that he's fighting so hard to go down is the corruption will be going down with him, with lots and lots of exposure. So I just think it's really important to always remember who his friends are and why that matters. You know, let's say he was a choir boy, but every single one of his friends, you know, were unregistered foreign agents. That would be weird. And clearly he's not a choir boy. And boy, do we have the evidence of that. And speaking of the former fellow, I want everybody to pay attention to victim ideology and realize that victim ideology is a part of the propaganda toolkit, and it always is attached to money-making schemes. And why that's important is that when Martin Scheel was on our show just a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about Trump continually turning lemons into lemonade, what he does is he profits by turning himself into a victim. He creates a cult by making people feel victimized and only he can save them. And when we find out that he profited off of something that he knew was a big lie to the tune of $250,000, and we still don't know where that went to, just realize that professional propagandists, dictators, create this victim myth around themselves. So people stupidly keep giving him money to continue that. Yes, Jim.
It's just trolling writ large, right?
Yeah.
Like all trolls do this. They attack and attack and attack, and as soon as you defend yourself or say anything, they're like, "Oh, stop attacking me! I'm a victim." And that's all that fucking
Brilliant.
Trump is, right? It's Brilliant. Just a giant trolling baby who goes like, "Me, I don't like you," and punches people, and then when they like shove him down and be like, "Get off me, you jerk," he's like, "No, you hurt me," right? And it's just it is grade school emotional manipulation.
Yes,
The
right.
bully oppresses other people. As soon as somebody fights back, the bully says, help, help, I'm oppressed. And they
Yeah,
become the victim.
exactly. And I think it's very important um, that when Biden gives one of the most epic speeches in presidential history, and because he's a subtle guy, people might not recognize it now, but I sure know that that was incredibly historic, and I'm sure the gentlemen too do too. And then it is countered, attempted to be countered by the braying of a whiny victim man. I think it's very important, as Jim and Hi-Fi have taught me, that people like Trump and Flynn know they have to stir up violence and chaos because they're going to fucking jail. Am I right?
Well,
You
I
are
mean,
correct. You are correct.
here's the thing. Either they're going to jail or they're going to win. And so let's
for them to win, they have to start a civil war.
Okay.
Well, that's my point. And that's why this is so fucking dangerous, because these are not just assholes like, on Telegram. Flynn has militias all over the country. He's got cult leaders all over the country. He's got constitutional sheriffs all over the country. Constitutional sheriffs literally mean people who are willing to go against the federal government. That's what constitutional sheriff means. And they're fucking like actual law enforcement with guns that say out loud that they are going to go against the government, that they are seditionists. And he's got these fucking people all over the country. So it's not just idle. It's not just an idle threat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. Well, once again, I'm reminded that we only get news like this told in this way on shows like this, which brings me to my third item in Front Loaded. Just as a few weeks ago, I've been asking, what is Twitter? What is Twitter? What is its purpose? We have to ask these very big questions because we are continually drowned in a flood of shit. And when I get harassed by blue check ex-military sociopaths who lead an army to come attack me, I have to say, what is Twitter? Why does this sociopath have a fucking 500,000 followers and a blue check when he is there clearly to commit harms as part of a military operation? I'm certain of it, and I think we've proven repeatedly, we've evidenced that. So my next question, and this
can I just clarify that, because
yes.
I don't. It is a paramilitary operation, right?
Thank you.
It's just for the audience and any trolls out there who want to make shit up. It's a paramilitary, but because they bring these military guys into these operations, and a large Twitter account who's putting out a huge amount of propaganda is an operation.
Thank you.
Fucking psychological operation. And because it's being run and executed by former military guys, presumably guys, former PSYOP guys,
right?
That's very meaningful, and it makes them experts at misusing and abusing these platforms for harm.
Yeah. Well, I wish it would fucking stop, because I'm tired of the harms.
Me too.
I'm tired of the harms. I'm tired of waking up and being afraid to pick up my phone. Let me just bring very quickly. We had Milo from the Media and Democracy Project and A Star is Born. I mean, everybody loved that episode, and Milo's able to, I think, hopefully amplify some of the work that they're doing, and he will be coming back to our show to continue holding media accountable. But I have to ask the question now, what is journalism? Journalism historically was the hallmark of a free society, a democratic society. It held, it spoke truth to power and was sort of the accountability, bureau for, holding politicians and anybody, corporations, whatever, to truth. And because of good journalism, so many regulations came, so many changes came. So I have to ask this question, because if a corporation is hindering truth, that is not fucking journalism. And I want people to start thinking about journalism in a different way. And that's all I wanted to say there. Clearly, this is something I'm passionate about.
I mean, listen, the corporate influence, foreign influence has always been part of journalism, right? Because journalism always needs to be funded by somebody. Somebody has to pay for that person to go and report on things. And generally speaking, money has some sort of influence behind it. For me, I think the issue is that because, as we'll talk to Alex about, writ large, the things that people are attracted to and pay more money for are the things that are more angry, violent, the equivalent of Facebook's algorithm and YouTube's algorithm, which encourages that, right?
Right.
And so I think we've got to address the fact that, in many ways, the entire internet is sort of encouraging us at large to this kind of violent situation. And I think that has infected journalism in a way that no group of human beings is going to be able to defend itself perfectly against. And I think we're definitely seeing the infestation of this into our, like, maybe we haven't seen before.
Amazing. And when I started in journalism as an intern at the Point Reyes Light in 1985, mom and pops could still exist. You could still win a Pulitzer as an independent, which the editor there did. And he survived on advertising. And yes, I got a pizza party and $50 by the time I was done, but I learned how to be a journalist. And then, of course, by the time I stopped a decade ago, we were reporting on what YouTube was reporting, and everybody's attention spans had shrunk down to, is it going to be a minute and 27 seconds? Is that too long? Does it need to be a minute 10? When I used to be able to do like multi-part 8-minute series and half-hour specials and all of that.
There's a whole story about Craigslist destroying the entire newspaper industry.
My God.
That you needs to be told, because that's literally what happened. It was just like, bam, we're done. You guys are
no more classifieds.
And the entire thing exploded. And like a lot of these explosions, the people who pick up the pieces are the rich people. And the rich people are often sociopaths who do not give a shit about other human beings. And so they pick up these pieces like the Washington Post and now CNN and now, more and more of these fucking things that they then weaponize, right? Happened in the .com crash as well, where they took all this internet shit that, all this venture capital money paid for, and then they took it and they turned it into weapons like Twitter and YouTube and Facebook.
It's interesting you bring that up, because Craig Newmark, who I've been in touch with periodically over the years, who founded.
I'm not saying Craig's a bad guy, by the way.
No. What's interesting is that explains why he has been so invested in supporting independent investigative journalism. He's the guy.
Because he knows.
He's the guy.
He fucking destroyed that shit.
Yeah. Okay. So hi-fi. Thank you.
Like I said, not that he meant to do that.
No.
That was the effect.
Hey, that's what we're going to be talking about with Alex too. Like, this is, this is a interesting. We live at interesting times. Hi-fi.
We're talking about harms that are done online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And well, one of the ways in which we can expose the harms done online is by putting the proper words to harms done online, how stochastic terrorism is done, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, word phrase of the week this week, apophasis.
Ooh.
All right. That is where...
Not apophenia.
Not apophenia. That's something else. No, this is apophasis. This is a rhetorical device. All right. Where the speaker brings up a subject by denying it, or denying that it should be brought up.
Ooh.
And a really good example of this, I refuse to talk about the fact that my opponent is a drunk.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
This is
good.
When did you last speak your wife?
Implying by denying.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you said it last week. Nice country you have there. Be a shame if anything happened to it. And I think, Jim, you might have given us a quote from Trump's speech last night too that related to this. I don't know if it was last night, but this is clearly something also used as part of the propaganda toolkit. Am I right?
100%. And it's also something that sort of the Chin culture has been doing with kind of irony for a long time. Like, oh, Hitler is stupid, right? While they have a fucking Pepe with a mustache,
right.
and it's all, and it oh, I deny being a white supremacist, wink wink, is something that's been.
I'm a Western chauvinist. I'm not a white supremacist.
I'm a Western, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not a racist. Like, so they make it okay for that subject to be talked about.
Right.
And then once that subject is absorbed, then they go to the next one. Then they go to the next more transgressive one. Until, now you're in a fucking, now you're in a van, like with a fucking outfit with khakis on, look like a big dumbass, like marching around.
To be honest, I have to give a shout out to Asha Rangappa, I believe is her last name.
Rangappa, that's her name.
Rangappa. She brought it up specifically with regards to Lindsey Graham and what he said about Trump is indicted, there'll be riots in the streets. So the other word for epiphasis is paralipsis. So same
I love
concept,
it.
right?
So, and what
words
Jim brought
are
up
important.
Brilliant. What Jim brought up in the rundown meeting was the Trump tweet. Big protests in DC January 6th will be wild. That is I think a very textbook example of this. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean Roger Stone's video that where he's saying we're gonna go to the nonviolent peaceful protest and I need money for Proud Boys. It was like, whoa, hold on, bro. What?
For body armor for protection.
To protect me. I need to protect me with the white supremacist terrorists.
I absolutely love it when Jim does voices.
Sorry.
No, I'm serious.
It's just something I do.
Satire is good. And I think when you actually throw in a little bit of, vocal satire, it works. Okay, so that's amazing. So let's get into why it matters, yo.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? By High Fidelity.
First story this week is the indoctrination engine. And what am I talking about? Well, we've talked before about Agape boarding school in Missouri and how they've had some accusations of physical and sexual abuse. Well, now we have Agape boarding school aiding in apparently the kidnapping of a teenager. And there was a divorce and the child had a restraining order against his mother. However, his mother had him kidnapped and sent to the school. The reason why this matters is there is a long history of the misuse of religious educational institutions. One need only look at Canada and how many thousands of Indigenous children ended up dead at religious schools. We could go to Ireland and look at the religious institutions, the mother and infant homes, the religious schools there, and the bodies found. Madrasas in Afghanistan, Iraq, that lead to the radicalization of people through religion. This is something that is a centuries-old problem, and it needs to be dealt with.
Can I just say, I mean, for me, the reason this matters is because one of the biggest goals of the Christo-fascists specifically, like DeVos and Prince and all those guys, is to destroy education, destroy public education. Peter Thiel goes to the Manhattan Institute all the time and talks about how we don't need college. There are some people who just aren't quite smart enough to go to college, and it's a waste on them. And just digging at the entire concept of any sort of organized, much less public education, because what they want is to be able to insulate and radicalize people into whatever they want.
Right.
And I think this happens to be a very, very extreme example of that. And there's all kinds of issues around this particular story, but it certainly shows that, here's a place that is not here to fucking educate people. Right?
Well,
and this is the kind of place, that the fascists want to be able to send people to. Sorry, Heidi.
No, I was going to say, when I did a lot of reporting on Charles Manson and the Manson family, and he was a sociopath created by religious boys' school. So I'm not saying.
Well, there's also some MK Ultra thrown in there.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah,
that's literally that's not a conspiracy theory, by the way. Guys.
Yeah. So moving right along, that's an important story. Thank you, Hi-Fi. What do we got next?
All right, next we got Saudi surveillance, and this is about an application that is still available on the Google and Apple app stores. And so far, one woman has been sentenced to 35 years in prison for retweeting dissidents on Twitter. And another woman was sentenced for 45 years for supposedly bad-mouthing the government. Any engagement in political activism is being closely watched. And again, history repeats itself. You could see, they didn't have an application for it, but in Mao Zedong's China, during the intellectual revolution there, neighbors reporting on neighbors.
Well, it's interesting because Ruth Ben-Ghiat talks a lot about how in the Nazi Germany, Hitler offered incentives, financial incentives, debt eradication to report your neighbor and turn a blind eye. So they're actually, once again, weaponizing tech. So really important stuff to keep an eye on.
Even more important is the fact that Apple and Google are enabling this bullshit. Sorry.
Yes. I mean, Apple and Google are enabling a lot, right? I mean, I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face. Ban fucking Telegram, and the radicalization of America goes down by a significant percent.
Right.
Literally, that's where tens of millions of people go every single day to poison themselves. We have got to be aggressive about this and say, you can't do that. You can't radicalize tens of millions of Americans. Apple and Google, you're fucking responsible for having that bullshit in your store. Get it out.
Right. Wow. Thank you for that. I mean, it's,
sorry for the TED Talk.
Don't apologize. Like, I look at Steve Bannon and the poison that comes out of that and the propaganda that emerges out of that and think they still platform him, I mean, I'm hoping that with the, Alex Jones in the spotlight, that there will be some kind of teachable shit from this. So, All right. We got something else coming up that sounds pretty freaking amazing.
Final one. No GPU for you. U.S. is now blocking sales of AI chips to China and Russia. We have said it on this program time and time again, and we are going to continue to hammer this point. Massive data sets on populations and artificial intelligence. We are in an arms race, and these weapons are as deadly as nuclear weapons.
Yes, that's right.
There need to be treaties. And now this is what our government has done. And this is good. I'm glad to see this. I mean, if we slow the advancement of artificial intelligence by our enemies, it gives us a chance to catch up, maybe surpass. However, I expect to see a retribution from China in the form of a restriction on the rare earth minerals that are required to make these chips. So expect that in the future.
What's interesting to me is I've got this long thread on how the FBI in 2014 sent out a massive warning. Though it may sound alarmist, losses of technology are a real danger. diverted technology could affect the primacy of the United States in both economic and military terms and could compromise our national security. And why I did this thread is because it talks about our friend Vexelberg and his investment in MIT tech and data to the tune of $300 million. We have just been asleep at the wheel. And I'm hoping with stories like that, it shows that we are waking up and fighting back.
Yeah, I just put another plug in for AI being the next frontier of all this.
Yeah.
I you know, in my real life, to the extent I have one left, I work with advanced AI, and this shit is fucking terrifying. It can sound like anyone you want. It makes mistakes here and there, so you can still sort of tell, but it's fucking terrifying how close it is to being indistinguishable from a person. And once that happens, and it's already happened to some extent, it's going to be a complete shit show unless we have defense against it, because you will not be able to tell what's real and what isn't.
Holy cow. Well,
sorry for that dystopian thing, but the government is apparently trying to at least battle in that space, which is awesome.
Why it's important also is that every futurist has said that this will have a huge impact, particularly on older adults who aren't as savvy. And why that's important is it was older adults who shared the most Russian disinformation on Facebook in 2016. So they are vulnerable, and they don't know. They don't know. They don't know.
I'm going to do a story. I'm going to do a story about how blatant the Russian propaganda is now. The QAnon and the Kremlin, literal, like out of the Kremlin, like look at the Russian troops going into Ukraine, WWG1GA, like literally just mixing QAnon and Kremlin propaganda all together into these huge networks. Like these channels have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and the people in them have no fucking idea that it's literally just the Kremlin going like, we're making fun of the QAnon, you know. So
I look forward to that.
It's fucking scary out there, man.
And but what's interesting is it's what you've been saying for months too. This is like, it's just proving your point. So I'm glad that we have you doing this kind of work. Again, I think at some point we're going to have to start showing our viewers what people are unwilling to look at that you face, so you can bring us this news, because people have to know just how bad this shit is. So it's real bad now. There's no limits. That's right.
No limits. And it's not even
just software.
It's and it's now at the point where it's not even like political propaganda at all. It's just these channels that have like, sort of algorithmic things. Like one channel has like Russian propaganda, and then Britney Spears, and then Melania, and then military Russian propaganda. And the fucking thing has 120,000 subscribers. It's called Special Q Forces. It's fucking crazy.
And we know from our friends,
but there's no political message. It's just literally a trap with the message inside of it, and people just scroll by and eat it up.
And our brilliant friend, President Jackie Singh, told us that there are people with PhDs concocting this stuff who understand this type of warfare. So I think that's the other thing that's very important, is that it's not just some randos being weird on the internet. It's literally like, cognitive hacks of our brains. So
the guys who invented this kind of warfare, right? Michael Aquino and Paul Vallely, that's where this comes from. It comes from, that sort of warfare. This stuff has been around conceptually for 40 years.
Wow.
But it all comes from that source and has been, perfected for 40 fucking years. And that's what America is experiencing right now is a full spectrum psychological warfare attack from people who know exactly what they're doing.
That's right. Well, thank you for that very robust Why It Matters news block. And let's move right on to a quick little hit from Sean's brief legal briefs.
Brief legal briefs.
So I just a quick hit, a Business Insider report that's quoting an MSNBC former federal prosecutor. I think it's very important that a former federal prosecutor compares the Mar-a-Lago probe to a narcotics case, saying it doesn't matter if docs were declassified, keeping them is still illegal. It's like having some white powdery substance in your trunk and saying, I didn't know it was there. And this prosecutor said that argument has never worked. So I just wanted to point that out because it's very important to continually, take away the smoke screens and just, if it, quacks like a espionage dealer, then it probably walks like an espionage dealer or something like that.
All
yes.
those empty folders.
I mean, it could be that all that other shit was what was in the folders. Maybe, I don't know. But holy
aren't those folders numbered and they know exactly what was in what folder? I
Listen,
mean,
totally. There's no fucking way that they got everything, right? There's no fucking way. Like they took shit that was but I'm guessing that they'll be able to sort out what was taken.
Yeah.
And that will be the smoking gun of the whole thing.
The moment he got into the White House, the shit started happening. He's inviting fucking KGB spies, I mean,
he's got Cass in the fucking Oval Office.
As George Bush says, that was some weird shit. You've got Tom Barrack, who's already been arrested, working as a foreign agent. You got Mike Flynn on the phone during the inauguration.
Selling nuclear secrets to the Saudis.
Come on, man.
Again, here are the 2 points of data that everyone needs to know. Trump left office January 2021. October 2021, the CIA sent a notification around the world, hey, tighten up because a bunch of our assets are being killed.
Yeah.
Those are just 2 data points.
If the MAGA Republicans have not figured out that Trump is a fucking spy, with your president even telling you that you're not patriotic and you don't love the Constitution, our president, Joe Biden, telling them, then I don't know what more we can do. I hope they will become like ex-smokers and, direct their venom accordingly, but we shall see. Anyway.
I only want to say one thing. It's not our president. It's everybody's president, elected through a legal election.
Yes, and anything else is a lie that is told, a tale told by an idiot who's profiting. Okay, so with that happy note, let's move on to Hellscape.
Jim Stewartson's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
Whoa.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy.
Hey, everybody.
I like this one.
So we're going to talk for a second about some weird shit, right? But the fact that it's weird is really important, and it is a weapon that is used. It's a defensive weapon, right? So there's this organization, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, which is also known as the Knights of Malta. And it is a quasi-nation state that has actual diplomatic relations with 120 countries. It's only got 15,000 members, but it is an official part of the Catholic Church, but has been largely autonomous for nearly 1,000 years. I mean, it has gone through different sort of formulations, but the Order of Malta are literally the Crusaders. So during the Crusades, they were called the Hospitallers because they were theoretically the people who went to help people on the battlefield, but they're called the Military Order of Malta for a reason. They were very, very deeply involved in all military components of the literal crusades against Islam. So the thing about the Knights of Malta is that they have been continuing literally the crusades for 1,000 years. And what do I mean by literally continuing the crusades? Well, I'm giving you in the cover photo I created here a little bit of a preview of how they have been fighting the crusades recently. And I have to give a hat tip to my dear friend Kayanan, who has always helped me with the research on this. But what's fascinating is that Pope Francis, I think, has recognized that they have really turned from, what was genuinely has done some good work and charitable work in the world, but was, had opinions about Islam, to now being an actual sort of psychological warfare component of this, larger scale battle for, democracy. And it's really that stark. And I'll give a few of the reasons why. So here's one of the ways that they defend themselves, as I was just talking about, is because it's fucking weird. Like, why is this happening, in the 21st century, where you've got people in robes and these fucking weird, like fashy kind of symbology, right? And this is the mellow version of the Knights. I mean, they go all out with the papal shit. Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Cosplay is a very important element in LARPing.
No, it's true.
Brilliant.
And it's one of the ways that you can create an armor around yourself and make it the character instead of a person who's doing the bad stuff that you're doing.
Interesting.
So here's where it gets really fucking dark. So these guys, the Knights of Malta, so 1,000 years of Islamophobia, they have a few historical moments that they always point to as their kind of rallying cry and have for hundreds of years. Well, the guy who murdered, the Nazi who murdered 51 people in Christchurch, had Knights of Malta shit all over his fucking shotgun. He had it all over his fucking cartridges with bullets. Like, he was covered in Malta shit. Right there, you can see, I believe that says 8chan, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And here's so why is that fucking on this Nazis? Why? What makes him follow these guys, right? And why would the Pope dissolve it, right?
Right.
Maybe it's because
look at that
the radicalization of these people is intentional. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying, and it gets worse, right? So again, they have 15,000 people. Eric Prince worked for Dana Rohrabacher in 1991. And Rohrabacher is famously, Putin pays Rohrabacher,
Russia's favorite congressman,
100%. And so the year after he was, Eric was an intern in Rohrabacher's office, he converted to Catholicism and immediately became a Knight of Malta. And Paul Behrens is very, very likely the connection there, because Paul Behrens was both a connected to Rohrabacher and Blackwater. Lots of guys in Blackwater in this again quasi nation state like Catholic sect. Rupert Murdoch, William Casey. This guy is responsible for the Manhattan Institute, was a director of the CIA for Reagan, one of the worst anti-democratic operatives in history, and it goes on and on. Leonard Leo, Federalist Society. God. You may be shocked to know that the guy who put fucking Christo-fascist monsters on the Supreme Court is not only an Opus Dei. He is a Knight of Malta.
Wow.
I mean, it goes on and
Stanley
on.
McChrystal. Oh my God. Jimmy Savile. Oh my God. Oh my God.
So look, it doesn't get better. I've done a lot of work into this. Here's very 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 dark story, but I wanted to kind of put it out there because the Pope. Here's the thing. I started talking about the Knights of Malta on Twitter, and it was one of the most, let's say, sensitive subjects I have ever run across. Immediately, I had 500 quote tweets calling me everything you can imagine, conspiracy theorists, Templars. What are you talking about? Like, it was really fucking weird. And then what happened the next week? A literal Knight of Malta named Austin Ruse, who is a very, very old school anti-abortion, like despicable propagandist who is a Knight of Malta, suddenly took this huge interest in me and started trolling me over and over. And all of these trolls with like knights on their avatars and shit just started hammering me over and over again. And I was like, oh, I hit a soft spot. Let's continue. And then I did, another 100 tweets in this thread showing how this just keeps showing up in all of these places. Why the fuck is it on his gun?
Right.
And so I think maybe the Pope had that same question.
Well, can I point something out about the importance of being a nation state and having diplomatic relations? One of the most important things about having diplomatic relations is you can have something called a diplomatic envelope that law enforcement is not allowed to open ever, and you can carry that across borders. If that's not a vehicle for espionage, I don't know what is.
But to Jim's point, yes. Why was it on the gun that killed 51 Muslims? That's a very important question. But
who trained him?
The Pope. But the Pope thought it was so important that he issued a new constitution. This is some big shit. This is some
it's a big deal.
Big yes. So
the point is that there's a couple of points. First of all, when people point this kind of shit out, and there's a giant trolling reaction to it, and people freak the fuck out about it. That's something that they're trying to defend. That's right. And the Pope seems to agree that there is a serious fucking problem here, and is I think doing what he can within sort of his reality to put a stop to the literal Islamophobic neo-Nazi group of terrorists that they've grown over there. Sorry to say that out loud. Knights come after me.
Yes, no.
What's funny is I brought them up on Reddit just a few days ago and was instantly attacked by someone who called me an anti-Catholic bigot, and it really laid into me.
Yeah. So
and this happens, and I'm like, I win.
Exactly.
When I point out that people should not want Peter Thiel destroying democracy through his creepy candidates that he sponsors along with Mercer, And then I get quote tweeted calling myself a homophobic immigrant basher. What that basically
always the victim, aren't they?
What basically that is saying is that I'm fucking A right. And to Jim's point, where did the Christchurch shooter get radicalized? We are going to be talking about some of this with our upcoming guest, and we are so excited. We have a most excellent guest. Alex Winter is joining us, and
I see what you did there.
I couldn't help it. We are going to be talking. We are going to be talking about his brilliant and very vital and timely new film that he directed and wrote, The YouTube Effect. So let's bring Alex in.
So it begins.
You're in a death battle, New World Order. We know.
If I lived in Saudi Arabia, they'd kill me. If I lived in China, they'd kill me.
You still gotta sell your soul. You gotta write your name in blood.
Whites are getting fed up. Whites are getting tired of being disenfranchised and neglected.
Hail our people. Hail victory.
Well, at first I was kind of just depressed skimming the web, but I think at some point I had found this video called God is in the Neurons, and it was from this YouTuber that I used to watch in high school. And it gave me this concept that I could rewire my brain and really self-improve.
Our beliefs have a profound impact on our body chemistry.
And that took me to self-help content, and then the algorithm just started feeding up more self-help content.
There is no such thing as mental illness.
You start with someone like Stefan because you're looking for self-help. And so we call that an on-ramp, right? In the study of extremism, we would call that an on-ramp. And you go from that self-help, which has now validated your identity, it's given you a direction to go, it's given you an algorithmic list, to use the word a bit ironically, of things that you have to do. And I'll tell you what, people are looking for that in a complicated world, and especially young men are looking for that.
It's now time for the return of men.
It seems that the algorithm would always pull you towards the more hyperbolic content, towards the content that was a bit more extreme.
Muslims by the million have been pouring into Europe, and you can see the terrible problems that have arisen as a consequence.
And there was an uncomfortability when you went a bit deeper into this specific ideology, because not only is it depressing, but it's hateful. That specific rabbit hole, I feel like what it was truly doing was, it wasn't radicalizing me. I was already radicalizing because of how my life was going. But it was killing my empathy. It was turning me into a sociopath.
YouTube is now like a Walmart in a town where there's a Walmart and a Dollar General and a CVS. Like, it's one of the sole organizing destinations. And in the case of the far right and like right-wing political content, radicalizing political content, it's like Walmart having a big old gun aisle.
I just have to say that's the moment for me. The moment I've talked to Caleb, he's amazing. And the moment for me in the whole movie is when he says it was turning me into a sociopath.
Right.
I think if you want to look at the broad problem that's happening, it's that normal people are being turned into sociopaths. So thank you for that. And thanks to Caleb as well. Brilliant.
Sure. Yeah.
For me, it was killing empathy. Okay, so Alex Winter, our friends know you for your film and your acting work, and we are grateful to know you as an incredible documentary filmmaker and director, and very grateful to my friend Gail Ann Hurd, who slid into my DMs and sent me a clip of this when it was first being shown. But the YouTube Effect is so important. This was a movie that needed to be made, and we'd love for you to share with our viewers what prompted you to dive into this very important dark world.
Well, I've been kicking around tech world for a long time, since the 80s, and got online when that became easier for regular folks to do, also in the 80s on dial-up modems and sort of plugging them into the back of your Mac Classics. That period, the BBS Usenet era, was a period of great change, and in many ways positive change. I was very invested in the communities that were growing at the time on the internet, pre-web. And, just to make it short, I got very interested in Napster when it appeared in the late 90s, because it was suddenly we were making this leap from, scraggly group of tens of thousands of us, or maybe hundreds of thousands to millions of people being online at the same time around the world communicating. It was a real watershed moment for a number of reasons that had little to do with music sharing or stealing, or however you want to frame it.
Right.
So YouTube for me is I've made several docs in the tech space, and YouTube and Google, which is the owner of YouTube, is a story I just hadn't seen told, and it's not all negative. There's a lot going on right now in the world that sort of requires, I think, some real scrutiny of the negative, which is why we went there. But Google exploded and quickly overtook a lot of the other companies at the time, and then YouTube similarly, once they got their hands on it, overtook a lot of other burgeoning video sites, and so now Google is the largest searched website in the world, and YouTube is the second largest searched website in the world. Both of them are owned by Google Alphabet. And I felt, why is no one looking at this in that way, right? Why is no one looking at this expansion, who they are, where they came from, the good that they do, the negative that's happening? There's a lot of reasons why certain stories don't get told, but when you have an opportunity to tell them, you take it. And Gail, who you mentioned before, who I have enormous respect for, actually contacted me, she and other members of her company, about partnering with her on this. And I leapt at it because it was, I was working on, to dovetail a little to Jim, I was actually working on a QAnon doc at the time, and COVID was erupting. It was becoming very difficult for me to tell that story the way that I wanted to, which was by embedding in families around the country that were being kind of torn apart by Q.
Oh, wow.
And so I rerouted my energies into this, and it became an opportunity to both look at the expansion of this giant front-end media company for Google, which is what YouTube is, as well as how technology was impacting the situation that we were dealing with, and are continuing to deal with, societally, politically, etc. So, sorry, that's about the shortest way I can answer that question.
That was great. Word up to Gail. I love her so much. She's a patron of our show, and we could use a lot more Gails in this world. For me, there was, we talk about it a lot. Carol Cadwalader looks at these platforms as handmaidens to authoritarianism. Nobody seems to wish to really truly do anything about it. And we have had friends on this show say, hey, until it affects their bottom line, not likely that so much is going to be done. And yet we keep marching toward dystopia, putting band-aids here and there on this. But, what are we doing, and what are they saying that they are doing about the darkness that has set in on democracies?
Well, I mean, and this is just my personal opinion, right? I don't think it's all negative at all.
Right.
I think that it can be dangerous, and not to discount Cadwallader, who is a titan in this space and has done incredible work, and who I've been, reverentially following for years. But sort of there can be a public narrative that I think is very counterproductive and not leading us towards meaningful change. And that tends to be very, very black and white, right? Either you've got this sort of crazy NFT technology, like the cultists, evangelists on one end, who are like, everything's awesome, right? And then you've got the people on the other end saying it's all evil and horrible, and you should just put your phone down and like go play in the grass. And both of those things are dangerous, I think. And I think in the middle, what you have is a world that's changing rapidly that you cannot stop. It's like water or air. These evolutions are they've been coming for a very long time. They are moving rapidly. We are on the cusp of enormous and radical change, unlike anything that we've seen up till now. This notion that it's a dilemma, like, do I use my phone or do I not use my phone? I mean, it's really, it's almost impossible to give it a comp because the changes are so vast, but it's almost like looking at the Gutenberg press and saying, well, hell, this is, think about the problems that are going to come once the masses have access to being able to create, literature or cars. Like, we should just stay with the horse and buggy because this is going to kill a lot of people.
Yeah.
These are not practical questions. They are, in fact, I think, a ruse. I think the idea that the narrative that's been spun, that is somehow the public's responsibility to police themselves, that it's a dilemma that we have, that like, oh, do we use Twitter or Facebook or not? I honestly think it's a ruse by these companies to keep the spotlight off of themselves and to keep accountability off of themselves. And if you look at it more like the automotive industry or the steel industry or and coal or energy, these are giant companies that are doing a lot of good, that are not going away. YouTube does an enormous amount of good. We don't want YouTube to go away. We don't want the internet to be stripped of rights. We don't want to clamp down on the ability for smaller websites to have freedom of speech. But by the same token, there is accountability. And there's a great deal of harm that's going on that has to be addressed. It has to.
Yes, beautiful. Jim, you want to say something?
Oh, I just I thought one of the most interesting moments for me was realizing that YouTube was built on Hot or Not, right? On the idea of taking this website, which is literally about objectifying mostly women, but it had men and women, but it's about objectifying people and rating them, right? And that was kind of the core idea. Ooh, that sounds great. And if you just take that kind of basic idea, which is, take people's sort of base instincts and then expand that to $1 trillion, advertising platform, I think more or less that wraps it in a kind of neat little story. And I just wanted to see why did you include Hot or Not into the movie?
I thought that it was really important to express the evolution of these technologies. I think that we don't have faces behind the companies. And, I like Steve Chen. I like Susan. These are people who have done a lot of really incredible work. It doesn't mean to say that people who work at these companies shouldn't be more exposed and accountable for the negative and the harms that occur on platforms that they have connections to. But I've been around a lot of really high-powered technology people my whole life. I've been around angel investors who were the front end of Facebook and Yahoo and Google and Napster. A lot of people are friends of mine, to be totally honest with you. And there is a I think, as you were saying before, it might have been before we actually started this interview, things move really fast, and people like money, and people have boards of their companies, and there are shareholders. And when it's like like Andrew Lloyd Webber once said that when the money starts coming in, you don't ask why, right? I think that's
exactly
right. So I think that when you have this rapid expansion, and you're riding the crest of this new wave, and you're looking at it going, wow, it's easy to look at the good that YouTube's doing, which is genuine good, which is why I really want to be clear. And that's sort of why I was seeing a lot of the evolution. The barriers that they broke down, the ability for trans people of color and more women, people in the Arab Spring and people in other parts of the world that had no voice to suddenly be able to express themselves, communicate, and monetize. Like, YouTube has done a better job than almost any other platform of fairly supporting their creators and allowing them to actually have an ability to monetize and have a career and a life and a voice, which is, for me, what I think is most important. And
I love that you highlighted ContraPoints. She's amazing.
There's a lot of amazing people there. And I think that a lot of the diversity drives that have occurred in my industry and other industries came as a result of them not wanting to get lost to the technology companies, going, well, they're letting all of these, we're eventually just going to get abandoned by our audience, right? That's what we're seeing happening politically, where you realize that, sort of like the pivot that just happened to a major unnamed television broadcast cable company.
I will say CNN. I will say CNN out loud. You don't have
right.
to. I get.
So I mean, if you're going to behave like a dinosaur, you're going to become extinct, right? So I think that YouTube came along and said, no, we're going to give voice to all these people. We're going to monetize. We're going to help them. And I think all those things are very important. I just think that wave, as you said, it's an advertising model. It's a very robust one. And Jim, you were talking about the hot or not, like we're young enough to remember MTV, right? We came up in that generation, and MTV was really the beginning on a massive level of a business model that said, we're not going to pay for any of this stuff, right? We're just going to make a pile of money off the advertising, and you're going to pay for all of it, and you're going to be the lucky recipient of having all these eyeballs. And I had my own show on MTV in 1991, and it was a massive hit, and like we couldn't even afford to eat. Like we were getting paid so much that me and my partner Tom, they were like, "This is a huge hit. Come back and do season 2." We're like, "You guys, we can't even pay our rent." So YouTube was an improvement on that, and suddenly people were being able to eat and live. What's happened in terms of the evolution of it, of course, is they were making so much money. They are making so much money that as that parasocial connection, that hot or not connection that you were talking about, that pulls in an enormous amount of audience, but it also it engages an audience and it shifts the psyche of an audience in ways that we've just never seen before. And it's obvious to people who are doing the studies on the ground now. I think most of the tech companies are really maintaining sort of willful ignorance about the level of it. For me, the Christchurch shooting, I think for a lot of people was hello, this is like we've been warning for years, and now like you can't ignore this anymore. But even after that, I think it was ignored. I
have said many times that smart actors are my favorite species, and you just prove that point. Seriously, like, no, I'm very, very grateful. I'm a cinephile, so for 100 years of film, and it's like somebody who actually can do what you do in front of camera and direct and write is just very, very valuable. And your perspective and the people that you know and the way you were able to tell the story, I think is very unique, including Arab Spring, I think was incredibly vital, because that is sort of the embodiment of how to break down country barriers that are, have siloed off the truth in their media. So I think that was very, very important. And on the other hand, you've got the congressional hearing where you have 3 of these tech titans. And I cannot help but look at that and go, was their empathy killed? Is it not registering? Is there a disconnect? For me, that was just so freaking chilling. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. There was just that, or why'd you include the clip, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, we use that as a very pivotal moment in the film structurally. So for us, you've gone through this whole journey in the film up to that point, almost the entire journey, frankly, and everything comes to a sort of a disastrous crash with J6, with the January 6th attack on the Capitol and the sort of murderous mob that's been incited by the president and all these people on these tech platforms, specifically YouTube. You've got people who've been radicalized specifically by YouTube, who are storming and committing horrendous acts of violence. And the buck stops with just a moment of just looking into the eyes, because that's in a way the sort of turning the parasocial nature on itself because of COVID. This congressional hearing, with Jack from Twitter, with Zuck from Facebook, and with us, with the head of Google, you have a moment of seeing them in their environments, even if it's a manufactured one, just like us, right? Staring into a webcam, just like Steven Crowder does, just like Candace Owen does, just like Shapiro does, just like the good people on YouTube too. And parasocial interaction is extremely powerful. It's much more powerful and less protective and more vulnerable and more, in a way, superficially intimate, right? Where they're not, Sundar, he's not in a congressional hearing, right? Surrounded by his lawyers, like we show later. it's just like there, boom, your eyes. And that's why the really successful YouTube influencers are successful. They're very good at performing in a parasocial environment. They're very good at looking.
Can you just define parasocial for the
that's
audience?
Sorry.
I get it.
Of someone who's read a lot of stuff on this. Becca Lewis and a lot of other people who are far more expert at this than I am, and a lot smarter than I am, have been writing about this stuff for years. And look, as an actor, you know this. You know what the power of staring into a lens and saying stuff is, right? You know what the power of celebrity is, which is a completely manufactured relationship, a pseudo relationship, a parasocial relationship between a person and the public that is based on fiction. So the idea of a parasocial relationship is that we get caught up in the idea of algorithms, right? The algorithm is what's driving everything right now. It sounds very techno dystopian, right? And it also sounds completely unsolvable. Like, how do you fix an algorithm? You can't, right? It's impossible. No one even knows what it means. It doesn't even really mean anything anymore. Your iPhone works off of an algorithm. It's meaningless. What really is the driver of this stuff, which is fixable, is the parasocial relationship, which is that if a person is staring into a lens in supposedly their living room or their home or an office, and they're looking at their webcam, which means they're looking at you, right? The end user, the public, it creates a very palpable, visceral bond. So when Caleb Kane was talking about, who was rabbit holed at, for years and sort of got sucked into the alt-right, if he's looking at stuff on Molyneux, if he's looking at different sort of far right Crowder, these people who are highly funded channels or brands who are pumping out very specific propaganda. Right. But it's all like, hey, you're my buddy. We're in our living room. I'm your friend. You're my friend. It's no different than when you get on the webcam and you talk to your mom or your grandma in Wyoming, right? It's exactly the same. Wow. That is what's causing these platforms to have so much power over the end user. That's why when people say this is no different than satanic panic or why are you shining a light on YouTube or Facebook? Like, what difference does we're just a technology company. Well, they're not. They're creating a completely different relationship with society, with the public at large on a vast scale. Right. When you're talking about billions of people on YouTube, order of magnitude more than TikTok or any of these other platforms, you're talking about the planet getting sucked into these parasocial relationships. And I think that is where the actual problem lies. It's also where the positives lie.
Yes. So it's a superficial, intimate bond is really what I'm hearing. And it can be
unless you genuinely know the person, right?
It can be weaponized for good. It can be weaponized for bad. Hi-Fi, I know you want to say something.
So I have kind of a two-part question here. The first one is...
geez.
Yeah, I know. I make this. All right. First thing is algorithmic manipulation. As a technologist, algorithm is code. Code is manipulatable. You can manipulate it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it could be altered and fixed. So I have to disagree with you there. Mm-hmm. But what we see in your movie is that people are being algorithmically manipulated, right? They're being dragged down these rabbit holes. Another thing, and you didn't really get into this much in the movie, is the manipulation of the algorithm to drive advertising dollars, which is something I'm very interested in. And also, since you're an old web guy, I'm sure you understand the implication of bots and how bots can be used to manipulate online voting, etc. Sure. What if there's what if someone has a bot that can generate artificial views for these channels? All right.
Sure. It's a different, can I unpack those one by one? Because there's a
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I would actually argue that we spend a lot of time talking about the algorithm, and we spend a lot of time talking about the algorithm's relationship to advertising and monetization. I'm aware that there are issues with the algorithm. I think that the problem that we have run into now is that it's as you know, being in technology, it is such a catch-all phrase, right? And the public doesn't really understand it. So they keep saying, just fix the algorithm, just fix the algorithm. And to be fair to Google and YouTube, they've done a lot of work on the algorithm. It's actually much harder. The recommended, not to bog people down too much in technology stuff, but the recommended algorithm has been changed significantly since when it was first introduced by YouTube. And sure, it's hard to tell a company that has an algorithm that is driving more views because people are more attracted to hateful content and violent content than they are to, more compassionate or humane content, which is an obvious fact that's been driving advertising since the dawn of man. Sex and violence is more appealing to and magnetic to the average human than, talking about how much we care about each other. And we talk about that actually a great deal in the film.
Yes.
The issue is that we don't have practical solutions, I don't think, that at the moment that are being addressed to these technology companies that irrefutably lay accountability at their feet for the power of their platforms. And when we just say, tweak your algorithm, their response to that, and it's a very easy one, is like, okay, we will. And then everyone goes away for 5 more years. Then there's 20 more school shootings and like a whole ton of people get killed. And we have rioting in the streets. When you've still got Steven Crowder on a massive platform on YouTube after the FBI, executed their warrant on Mar-a-Lago, calling for war on his Twitter account to his millions of followers. That's a parasocial problem. That's not an algorithmic problem.
So here's my follow-up. Here's my follow-up. How about regulation? Where are the laws?
Yeah.
Technology moves at the speed of light. Our regulation, our legislation moves at the speed of old white dudes.
I would say it's worse than that. And again, we get into this in the film. Sort of, I'd say our whole third act is about this very question. From my perspective, diving into this world, and I know you don't think this way, but I think it's giving the Congress too much credit to just say they move slowly. There's so much dark money. There's so much lobbying power.
Yeah.
People, when you're dealing with a company the size of Google, it's not just the right that's getting bought. The left is getting bought. Everyone's being told to just shut up and sit on their hands. So there is no antitrust. There is no legislation being presented. There is no reform. There is no regulation. There's literally nothing happening. And when people of any magnitude or significance at the moment, and when people say, that there's going to be change, there's going to be regulation, or like, what can we do? That's the reason that I kind of bristle at these sort of quick fix ideas, like, oh, just tell your kids they can't be online. Mm-hmm. Because boy, is that doing these companies a giant favor. That's just like, it's like they're going to still be making, because the kids are absolutely going to keep getting online.
Yeah.
No one's moving offline. Everyone's moving more and more online, whether the Luddites like it or not. That ship sailed a really long time ago. What does need to happen, it's going to take a long time, I think, is that there has to be more conversation around what's going on, so that it becomes impossible to buy off people who are much more aware of the dangers and the harms and what's causing them. And I think that right now, the big tech companies are winning from the standpoint that they've got like only the technologists or the experts will talk amongst themselves about algorithms and things like that. The general public so doesn't understand that. A senator doesn't understand that, So most of the antitrust lawyers don't even understand it. So until we can
I think the internet's made of tubes and shit, right? I mean,
I'm like, what is it? I don't know.
Oh, you did a brilliant job on the film, showing the auto industry and showing the various industries that became monopolies that took a while to regulate. And I think that was an essential frame.
Well, Anthony Padilla from Smosh, who is an incredibly smart fellow who came up on YouTube from the very beginning of his life as a teenager in high school, has this great quote where he just says it's like a digital car crash. Like you just have this traffic jam and there's no traffic light. And so you just have cars just smashing into each other all the time. And like at what point
people love traffic accidents, right? I mean, half of YouTube videos were car accidents in the early days. It was like all car accidents.
They love the illusion of freedom, right? They love the illusion that they have no brakes. Like and it's a very childlike mentality. It's just sort of failing the marshmallow test of oh, I don't want to have someone tell me what to do, you know? And then meanwhile, you have these harms.
So one of the issues that we face here on the show all the time is that really important stories get blocked behind words. And so we say Gamergate, and that is like a freaking wall goes up. People don't know what it is. And I'm so glad that you addressed it in your film. And is there a way that one of you can just give us a sentence on what that is? And I guess, Alex, and why did you feel it was so important to include it in the film? I thought it was absolutely vital.
Well, Jim knows a lot more about this than I do. But, you know, Brianna Wu is someone who I have a great deal of respect for.
Me too.
She's in the movie. And I watched that whole thing go down. A lot of us did, and a lot of us got caught up in it in little ways because it's like, you know, as trolls know, you know, they're really just out there looking for, you know, they're inciting this kind of
where's the target?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you know, that's the exhausting thing about the internet in the age of Trump, where the left is always like, oh, look what he's doing now. Look what he's doing now. It's like you're just feeding the beast. Like you're not going to wake up the, you know, it's a sort of click Mueller time crowd, you know, like you're not going to wake up the right by sort of pointing your finger at. They want us to be angry and feel frustrated. And Gamergate was just trolling. I mean, it was trolling that got incredibly out of hand, which is their end game. So they won. They want it to get out of hand. And you know, I don't want to like stop. It's so complex. I don't want to stop and get into the whole evolution of who did what to whom when. Because it starts with a
podcast on that already.
Yeah, it's kind of almost a soap opera, and like there's a lot of soap operas that happen in any institution or environment or community, and gaming has a lot of soap operas going on in it, and they just took a little soap opera and they just poured gas on it and a match on it, and then they turned it into anti-women, anti-trans, you know, anti-people of color, anti-gay.
Well, it started with Red Pill, right? And Red Pill, there's the evolution of Red Pill is, I think, sort of indicative of the entire thing, right? Because Red Pill started as misogyny. It was a Reddit board that was all about just misogyny that turned into Gamergate, you know, sort of over a couple of years. And then Red Pill turned from specifically being misogyny to being how do you radicalize and indoctrinate somebody into this, you know, sociopathic mindset, right?
Yeah, and if you're an angry, lonely, feeling disenfranchised, largely white male young person, and you want attention and you're not getting it, if you create a fight with your perceived enemies, you are now the center of attention. So you have won. And that's how trolling works. So the bigger your audience, the more you have won. And your little, you know, it's a lonely place for a lot of human beings. You know, I wouldn't, it's not just for incels.
And talk about parasocial, right? That's where that stuff really gets intense. When you're talking about anger and you're talking about taking action against people, that, you know, it gets very, very cult-like. You know,
the internet is really a destination. I think a lot of us have been saying this for a very, very long time, going back to the Usenet BBS era. It's a destination. It is community, and that was the mistake in the response to Napster. The reason everyone got so mad, the reason everyone was so mad at Lars was that from Metallica was that he was, in their view, he was pissing on their community. You know, to them, it wasn't about stealing music. It wasn't to say he didn't have a valid point, right? Because it all happened very fast. So I'm not sitting here going Napster good, Metallica bad. We all know that they were way ahead of themselves in terms of a business model and legality, and we get it, right?
Right.
But the 100 million members of that community were very connected to each other, and these platforms create community. And if you're alone in your room, you want to be part of a community. And Gamergate was a lot of people going, oh, this community is leaving me behind, right? And I don't want to be left behind. And we see that a lot right now. And I think that people don't seem to make the connection between, they don't seem to understand, because people can be very angry at the idea that we now live in such a tech heavy world. And I get it. It's not all good. Just like driving cars isn't all good, but here we are. these communities are very, very real. So if you are attacking that community is going to attack back. But guess what? It's going to do that in the real world. It's going to shoot you, right? It's going to come to your book reading and it's going to attack you. It's going to go to your school. It's going to go to your parent teacher conferences, right? It's going to attack in the real world. And that's the problem that we face today. And I think people are confusing. They're not understanding that the issues are entwined.
Yes.
Right. They're saying, oh, YouTube is proliferating right-wing propaganda. It's like, no, these are communities. They exist in this ecosphere that billions of people are connected to.
Yeah.
You cannot separate them. And you cannot just flick a switch and turn them off. It's just not going to happen.
And this is why knowledge of the history of chanology is important, because that's when the first time Anonymous took an online community to the streets in a massive movement.
Yes, yes.
So
and Jim and Hi-Fi do a really brilliant kind of history explainer in 70 minutes. That's okay. Right. I know we only have you for a couple more minutes, so there's two things that I want to
I'm fine, you guys. I'm fine.
Right on.
I got like 15 more minutes if you.
Right, we're going to keep going then. So my thing is, I thought it was really brilliant. And for anybody just tuning in, Alex Winter directed an incredibly important, vital documentary for our time, The YouTube Effect, and that's what we're talking about right now. And you did an incredible job of the talent that you chose, like Anthony Padilla and Natalie Wynn, and that little sweet kid named Ryan and Ryan's family.
He's so lovely. His parents are so great.
I love them. I love that kid. I love the fact that somebody who at 3 years old decides they want to be a YouTube star becomes a phenomenon. Why it was so important was because you also showed that these beautiful things that people are trying to do for fun and for good, and yes, for profit, can be so sinisterly weaponized. And did you ever find out, was there a foreign state behind the kid trauma cartoons? Was it just opportunism by individual people, or was it just this thing that happened that YouTube had to, shut down as quickly as they could? Because clearly,
well, there were.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, there were different things that went on, and we sort of focused on one because it was the easiest to digest. But I mean, sort of to your point about bots, the internet is because it's a community where a lot of different things happen. There's a lot of different kinds of actors. And I think that's the other thing that we really saw happen in the rise of the Trump era, which was really sort of the first time we'd had an autocrat take over in the digital age. So you had all these bad actors. And again, people got confused and they were like, suddenly it became like a meme, right? Like, oh, you're just a bot. And someone on the other end of their phone would be like, no, I'm not. I'm not a bot. Like, oh, you're just a useful idiot from Russia. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm in Ohio. I'm not a useful idiot. But there were bots, right? And there were sort of, Putin created FSB and GRU, farm hacker farms. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a community filled with lots of people. I said this to people when I was making the film about the deep web and the dark net, was like, look, it's not all one thing or the other. It's like, if you imagine the internet is like Chicago has, criminals in it, and it's got areas where you can buy drugs, and it's also got it's got nice art museums, and you can go to the theater. It's like the internet's exactly the same, and it has it's a stew. Right. And that's why it's so easily manipulatable, because if you're clever at it, whether you are the FSB or you are an alt-right or far right, or you are like a Koch funded, fueled bot farm that is very specifically and highly funded, pumping out propaganda, they know they're going to create chaos, right? They know they're going to make it impossible to untangle this Gordian knot of like, well, who's the bot? Who's the Russian person? Who's the Koch funded, maniac who's like giving $100 million to like hackers? It's like, and who's just my grandma who's just a racist,
Well, I know the answer to one of those. The answer to one of those is Peter Thiel. So
yes.
And I agree with you. I think you can focus. I agree that you can focus and I think we should absolutely, like, my answer is absolutely not to just throw up your hands and say, hey, it's just a free for all.
Yes.
And that's why I make documentaries, like, the best of my ability in the little tiny way that I can. I try to focus on certain issues and clarify them. And I agree. We desperately need a Peter Thiel doc. We desperately need a doc on what the Koch brothers are doing, or Koch brother, I guess now, is doing, and all these massively funded propagandists and how they are creating and germinating and disseminating this disinformation all of those conversations need to be happening. And to some degree, they do, and they are, just not enough.
Can I make one suggestion for a documentary? Is Telegram. I don't know how much time you've spent there, but there's 700 million people.
No, I know. I've read about, yeah.
And it is just a cult indoctrination machine. And you just go there, and there are tens of millions of Americans just getting brainwashed into the craziest stuff all day long, right? And Apple and Google, speaking of which, have this right on their stores as one of the top communication apps. And it's just cult indoctrination. There's really very little else. Although I know it's used for things like Arab Spring, and it's been used for good. It is a massive, terror platform.
I think you're alerting to terror over here.
I like there's like a chainsaw, like Jason.
Exactly.
In the background.
Someone's working outside my door.
So, with the few minutes that we do have, I would love for you to, let's button up the YouTube effect. Your takeaways as a father and as somebody who immersed himself in this world on how you brilliantly ended the film with David Bowie as repurposed by Air. Oh my God. And in that song, David Bowie, who's so prescient on all of this, is demanding a better future. So how can we and our viewers and parents and as many people as this will reach demand a better future?
Look, I hate to be on the nose, but I think we need to demand a better future. I think that we can't fall for the propaganda. The propaganda right now is telling us, the end users, to change. That's a horrible message, and it's totally counterproductive. I think that we have to demand of the organizations, institutions, government, big business, obviously, that means the big tech companies. We have to demand that Congress acts. We have to demand that these companies change. They can't just come back and say, well, if you abolish Section 230, there's not going to be any freedom of speech. Yeah, we know that. Like those of us who've actually read Section 230 are well aware of what it does. The answer to that you have algorithmic problems can't be we tweak the algorithm. It's just simply not enough. So the point is, I think that, and again, this is simply my opinion, but it's sort of how I've raised my kids. It's like, you have to be on your computer. You have to be on the social platforms. You have to be involved in the technological communities that are driving our world today. You cannot pretend they're not here.
Yeah.
Right. They are here, and they are making money hand over fist, and they are not going anywhere. And even if we regulate them, they are still not going anywhere. And guess what? Our future is going to be more in that space, not less. No matter what you want to do, right?
The digital world used to be this kind of reflection of your real world, right? It was like you put your pictures of your family, and your real world was the actual thing, and this was just your digital version of it. Now it's not that way. It's just as real online, if not more so, because that
you're a part of, right? Yeah, it's like it's a community. It's like if we lived in caves and suddenly we realized we could go outside, and everyone's like, well, the cave is the real world. It's like, well, no, both are the real world. I think that it's
right, but there's no rules in the digital one like we have in the real world, right?
Yeah,
it's an unregulated community.
Right. I love so much. Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead.
I thank you. I love so much of what you said, because you are looking at people who are victimized and have been, me since 2018, Jim constantly in 20 years, Hi-Fi trying to, be our virtual bodyguard and trying to fight back. But you are looking at people who have been traumatized by trauma merchants who are, their goal is to, in Jim's case, suicide trolls. And I actually faced that a lot in 2018 as well myself. And to be told to just fucking suck it up, I'm sorry, that does not work. We are traumatized continually. We've learned to live with it, but I've started viewing the victims who have succumb to online suicide trolls and have committed suicide as gun violence victims. And I'm thinking to myself, what are we doing as a society if we are not protecting people? And again, you do a great job. And I'm looking at Carrie Goldberg, the lawyer who actually supports and fights for people who suffer online harm.
She's great.
She's amazing. We need so much more of that. And I'm really hopeful that your film gets the kind of distribution that will actually force action and regulation. So people like me and Jim and all the others just aren't like, having to open our, phones in the morning and just sort of put on like punk rock armor and go, okay, who's going to tell me something that's not true about myself today on a public, forum.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I think that we just need more conversation. Documentaries are good at that. And they help create conversation. They raise questions that need answers. They don't provide easy answers ideally. No. And that's what we try to do.
Right. Beautiful. Two quick
and
things.
Now I'm being chainsawed again.
Okay, that's all right. Panama Papers and Zappa, you've done some amazing stuff. I mean, this show has our financial correspondent is an ex-IRS criminal investigator who, brings up the Panama Papers all the time. A quick bullet on that, and then a quick bullet point on Zappa.
Well, the Panama Papers was an interesting opportunity to tell a story that a lot of people didn't know, but was of just massive significance. It was the largest global coordinated active journalism in history, and it was exposing something that people have been trying to get their arms around for really centuries, but certainly the last century, right. Which is how offshore and hidden money works, and basically showing that there's a completely separate economic society functioning in tandem with ours, and that doesn't pay taxes and basically funnels an enormous amount of money out of national coffers, enough that would solve hunger and energy crisis many times over. So we're talking about significant amount, trillions and trillions of dollars. So that just felt, again, adding to the conversation, getting people to talk about something that may not give you an easy answer. But I sort of go to bed at night thinking, if one 12-year-old watches one of these movies and decides to go become an environmental lawyer or a financial regulator or whatever, then I've done my job. And I only need one. I don't need millions, right?
Right. That's how we are.
Yeah. So it's that was sort of the impetus. And Zappa was almost similar. I was interested in sort of looking at a period of politics through the eyes of an artist who was engaged in the politics of his time. So it's a movie about art and trying to make art when you're living in a climate and a country that is somewhat anti-art, which America was very much so in the 80s under Reagan. Yeah. And how you fight that, how you express yourself, how you earn a living. And Zappa was so erudite. He was so good at articulating his struggle that he was a great tool to tell that story through. And that was kind of my motive with that. Though there's the fun of just like getting to make a movie about a guy who was amazing and did great stuff.
Right.
I have 75 Zappa albums on vinyl. First pressing.
For my target audience.
Like fucking Frank is, a hero in the top echelon.
Love it.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Great. I'm just digging the fact that you just used the word erudite. That's just one of my favorite words. Final thing you want to tell our viewers, about the YouTube effect or anything that you have coming up?
Well, I mean, honestly, keep an eye out for it. We'll probably come out later this year or early next year. We'll be doing plenty of yakking around it. In the meantime, get involved, read up on what's going on out there with these platforms and don't feel like you're being booted off your community. Stay on your community and fight.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. That's what we do. That's what we do. We get up and fight every day.
Yeah.
And thanks to you, I listened to a lot of David Bowie last night, and that made me feel
never a bad thing. I know my wife was starting to go crazy because after he died, I think I didn't do anything other than listen to Bowie. And I will plug Brett Morgan's amazing doc, Moon Age Daydream, which is insane. It's so good. So go see that too.
And the music soundtrack on the YouTube effect is really, really incredibly beautiful.
Well, that's Paul Hasslinger, ex-Tangerine Dream and a genius, and yeah, did an amazing
Fully.
I spent high school listening to Tangerine Dream like
I did too.
Yeah.
Me too.
The scores. We're going to release the soundtrack separately. It's amazing.
Brilliant. Yeah, I felt the same way.
Can I get it on Napster?
Yeah, we can get it on Napster. Yeah.
Now
for $19.99.
Alex, I'm so grateful you came on, man. Really,
so much.
Thank you for having me.
I can't wait until it comes out. Everyone needs to see this.
Yeah.
It's really
great.
So
thank you.
Give my love to Gail.
Right. Will do.
Thanks again.
Wow, that was incredible. That
was great. Yeah,
I knew it'd be a great interview, but exceeded all expectations. Just somebody who just freaking gets it. That's just so important. I do think it would be very fitting if we gave Frank Zappa the final word on this show from Crossfire 1986.
The biggest threat to America today is not communism. It's moving America toward a fascist theocracy. And everything that's happened during the Reagan administration is steering us right down that pipe.